welcome to Pressure Point. How often it is that so many of us wish to have a time when we could do our own personal and spiritual journeys. We will have a conversation in this program with Joan McMurty, who has done a journey to self, trekking in the Himalayas. Welcome, Joan.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, Joan, as you know, a 75-year-old woman asked you, why did you do this?
It was in the context of showing some of my slides, and I was showing the tent and the little sleeping mat that I was on, and she looked at me and she said, and you chose to do this? So yes, I'm choosing to do this. I spent about a month in the Himalayas of northern India and was on a guided trek. I trekked actually with a German family, and we had professional guides, and all of our stuff was carried by ponies, and essentially spent a month in the mountains. It was wonderful.
So what was the motivation before you decided to take this trip, and what preparation did you undertake?
I had some sense of myself of needing some space, needing some sense of, I guess, renewal is pretty well. I'm a parish minister. I'd been in the parish for a number of years, and feeling kind of tired. Not the tiredness that a couple weeks of holiday would renew, but kind of a bone tiredness. I've always been active outdoors, interested in kayaking and hiking. And a few years ago, I hiked some in the mountains in BC and came across a fellow who had spent about 15 years of his early adult life in the Himalayas. And he talked about being in the mountains. And he talked about the people. And he talked of it in such a spiritual way.
And why the Himalayas for you?
Because they're there. They also have a mystique to them. One place I read that they're talked of as the realm of the gods, and it's isolated. It's away. It's off in parts of the world where most of us don't have an opportunity to travel, and so it intrigued me, being in the mountains and being in the isolation. And being with the people for whom their faith, spiritual life was still integrated with everyday life. And where I trekked was the area called Ladakh, and this is Tibetan Buddhist country. So those are the people that I encountered.
So when you say that the spiritual lives are still integrated, how did you experience that?
Oh, everywhere we went, there were visible signs of the faith. Over the houses there were looked like pieces of cloth, white cloth, and those were prayer flags. So you'd go out your door and there they would be. And then outside every village is this large structure called a stupa, and that's at the entrance to every village. And then all along the villages there would be walls called mani walls. And on these walls there would be carvings on rocks, huge rocks. And these would be carvings of a Buddha, or carvings of the mantra, Mani Padme
That's the chant.
That's the chant. And these would be carved 10 years ago, hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. And the people would do that as part of their journey. So you just had a sense of a kind of a presence. You know, I think of our urban cities here, and even in the countryside, like what draws us to a sense of the holy? Well, they've still got that in their place, and have a sense of the little children have beads around their necks, the turquoise stone, and feathers in their caps.
So now here you were in, as you say, Buddhist territory. You're a woman. You're a Christian minister, and you are viewing all of these symbols and their ways of life.
Yes.
And we're seeing it as an integration of body and spirit. How are they seeing it? Are we making some assumptions about how they're perceiving it?
Probably. I mean, we always see things through our own eyes. The language barrier was such that I didn't have a chance to chat much with them. all I could do was kind of observe and be. And that really was my stance throughout this, was that I wanted to be present to the people and to the experience and to the mountains. And so I didn't take a lot of literature with me or fill myself with ideas of Buddhism or ideas of the mountains. My journey was to be present to what I experienced. And that, I think, is one of the most powerful parts of a pilgrimage, is being able to be present.
Say more about that experience, Joan. Being present in body is one thing, and it was probably not that easy either.
No,
camping and trekking.
I mean, yeah, a lot of it, you know, had to do with just really a lot of physical hard work. We hiked from 6 to 8 hours a day. We climbed passes as high as 18,000 feet. We went for days without seeing a village. There were always kind of people around. There was sort of the little core of us who traveled, and a few other groupings who traveled on the same way. But so a lot of time just to be self, and just to experience the walking, experience the working of the body, the integration of the body, and to be present. See, what do we know about being present? Even for me, as a Christian minister, I take very seriously the disciplines of my tradition. I do my continuing education, usually at theological colleges. I try to know what the latest readings and writings are about. You know, I develop skills. But the sense of being able to be present to self and to the world and to God is not something you take in a 2-week course at a theological college, or you develop a skill about. And I think that that many of us can get really cluttered with the things of our life, and that there's a kind of a longing, or what I've called kind of a coming back to self. Getting rid of all of that stuff. And what will allow you to do that? Well, I thought a month in the Himalayas might do that.
That's
a month
right.
In the presence of the mountains and the valleys and the rivers, and of a people, and of some aloneness as well.
Now, there's been a long tradition in the Christian tradition of solitude and pilgrimages.
Yeah.
So, are you following
Yeah, I
this
sort of
tradition?
feel I'm part of this tradition. Yeah. You know, you listen to the stories of Jesus, and periodically, you know, he was spent time with people, engaged with healing the sick and making the blind see, and challenging the Pharisees of his days. But then he would go off, you know, and the stories of him going off would be up to the mountain, or onto the sea. And that's the tradition of the Judaic tradition, where Moses went up to the mountains, and so there's a strong sense of that. I know, however, though, that it's not a kind of a pilgrimage for everyone. I mean, for one thing, you know, I feel very blessed that I have the ability, the health, to be able to do this kind of walking and trekking and climbing, and secondly, some people don't experience that presence with nature in the same way as I do.
Because you were walking for many hours
For many
every
hours,
day.
yeah.
And does this solitude in these trails in the Himalayas, I'm imagining very stark beauty. Does the solitude become loneliness, or how would that experience be different on a journey like this?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't remember feeling lonely, and I guess I always knew that if I wanted to chat it up with someone, I'd just have to kind of hang back or walk quickly. I always chose to hike on my own. So you're not alone when you're in the presence. You're in the presence of the mountains, of the rivers, of this wonderful piece of creation. And I think my experience was of being filled with this sense of the holy and the sacred.
So you're talking about you weren't lonely as a body, as a corporal entity, but that you were not lonely in the presence of creation. So what is that phenomenon?
Well, it's hard to say, but I know that a lot of folks are lonely today, you know, and for those reasons, people wouldn't think of doing this. So there is some irony, some twist to this.
Yes. And what and who is the self? Because we all are in our world in the West. Our notion of self is the physical self.
Yeah.
So, what and who is the self that you are journeying with or towards?
Well, I guess it's the sort of core center part of me that that's true. I don't know. It's the part that's freer to engage. I remember early one morning, just waking up. This is about 5:30 in the morning. We always got up early because hiking is best in the morning because it doesn't get so hot so early in the morning. So we're always up early, and by 7:30 we're on the trail. But this morning I woke up to this lovely sound of this voice, and it was a young girl's voice singing. So I quickly got myself together and poked my head out of the tent. And there she was in the field with her mom. She must have been maybe 10 years old. And I just sort of stayed by my tent and listened to her for a while, and she was singing. Probably, I don't know what she was singing, but I had a sense of, from her own faith, you know, community tradition. And so decided to approach her, and I sort of smiled and greeted, and how you kind of nod with people. And so she finished her song and looked at me. Well, I then sang a song to her.
Oh, did you, Joan?
And she sort of looked at me. And then I nodded for her, and she sang a song. Well, we did this for about half an hour.
Oh, did you?
And it was a moment of grace. I mean, how do we connect? You know, like your question was about self. Well, that's about self. And here we are in these two mysterious languages, but both of us connecting at some profound level. And then I was called off to breakfast, and I kind of greeted her and then left away. Yeah.
So I know that Eastern thought or Eastern religions talk about a kind of a profound unity, and as you tell the story of this little girl entering your space, your personal space, your spiritual space, that was the idea that came to my mind, is this moment of unity and this moment of presence.
Right. Yeah.
So that would be a kind of an example for me, listening to you, of what this experience of presence would be, not an abstract.
Yeah. There's another kind of presence too, and I think it has to do with the physicalness. I trained for a couple of years before I went, hard aerobics. This was hard work. You know, people are not encouraged to climb to these heights unless they're really fit. And so what I had to do was to work with my body. And I think that's a kind of a strange and foreign thing for many of us. Our body is kind of a thing to be managed or controlled, you know, from our urges. And so for me to train was for me to prepare, not just sort of in my head or in my heart, but my body, so that my body can be present. And that to me is very important part of spirituality, is that connectedness with body. So there I am with my body working for me, strong. You know, I felt good about it. I felt energized, and I felt I was working with the body as well as working with the mountains. Because I know that there's some people who will do a trek like this, and it's kind of how hard and how high and how long and you know all of that. Right. And we met some people like that on the trail, and but there were others for whom this was not an issue of conquering the mountains. It was an issue of moving with, and that's really important. How can I be connected with myself, my body, and with the mountains in such a way that we're working together on this?
Without the model of dominating the mountains or dominating my body.
Exactly, controlling and managing and all of that. Yeah.
So what did you learn from the people you met on these trails. Well, first of all, who did you meet? These are long stretches of
These
trails.
are long stretches, and as I say, a lot of time was spent on my own, and kind of deliberately so. And then I met a lot of trekkers from all over the world, so that was kind of fun to sort of hear their stories. And you know, everyone has a story, and at some level, everyone was on a kind of a spiritual pilgrimage. I mean, they were kind of interested in me because I was this. Eventually, I told them that I was this ordained minister, and so of course they saw me as religious. But you see, I saw in what they were doing as a kind of a pilgrimage. Yeah. So we saw those folks, and then in hopefully a hospitable and a gracious way, we kind of brushed up against the people of that world, and you know, I was ever so conscious of the differences. You know, how even just what I was wearing, you know, was so costly, you know, compared to their lifestyle. And I wondered, what is it like to be truly hospitable in this scenario? Because I'm into their territory, and my presence is changing the very nature of what their life is about. So it was kind of a brushing up and a lot of smiles, and found the people very hospitable. Another village we were in, there were a number of stupas all kind of standing in a row, this bright white, and there were children around kind of playing, and we would get to play with the children because they were most open and responsive to us. And as we were standing there, this old fellow, at least I thought, older fellow I should say, because I don't know really how old he was, but came along, and he started walking around these stupas, and he had the kind of reddish brown cloak on, and his hat on, and gray hair, and he had his prayer beads in his hand, and he was obviously in a prayer. Well, you know, we've seen that. We've seen religious people at prayer. Well, he stopped, and he beckoned to me. I mean, I was sort of standing there as, you know, kind of tourist dude, kind of looking at the scene, but he beckoned to me, and he looked at me, and he gave the Buddhist mantra, Mani Padme Hum. And I nodded, and he said it again, Mani Padme Hum. And so I repeated it, and he smiled, and then he said it again, and then I said it again. And then he turned and he started walking. And then he turned and looked at me with this big smile and gestured for me to come. Well, you see, he was inviting me in. He was wanting me to share with him in this ritual. And and so I would follow him. And every once in a while he'd turn around and make sure I was saying the right words. And then he would gesture for me, and then he would smile. Well, I mean, what did I learn? I don't know what I learned. Hospitality, an invitation, an openness.
A deep connection.
A deep connection, yeah.
You know, you're a woman who's come from a faraway place, but you're there, present, and there was going to be a connection made. And I'm thinking that this little girl sang with you, and this man, this is his form of singing.
Yes, and he invited me into his experience, you see.
Yeah. So this doesn't happen to us when we walk around the parks around here.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Was it your openness, being on this pilgrimage, on this journey, that allowed that to happen? Was it their hospitality? What was each of you bringing to this connection?
I mean, I think that I was kind of more intentionally focused on being on journey. You know, I think that's part of it. You know, I think, you know, we're so busy with projects and responsibilities and what we're about that we forget that ultimately it's the person, it's the self for whom is the strongest witness.
Yes, and I think part of that journey of that self is to uncover the layers that hide the openness and the illumination.
Right.
So what is our responsibility, each of us? Do we have a responsibility to seek this journey?
I think so.
To self?
Yeah, I think so. And as I say, our journeys are, I think, quite different. I mean, not everyone will find that journey to the mountains of Himalayas. I say one thing, you know, I feel very blessed that I have the physical energy to be able to do that, and financially to be able to go.
So how would one do it if one couldn't, either economically or physically?
Well, I think all of us, if you asked, you know, where is it? What place? What activity? What experiences do you have in your life where you really feel the kind of centeredness, where you really feel on kind of solid ground, where you would say that I'm really my true self. All of us can identify that. People will say, "Oh, I know, it's out at my cottage when I sit on the bench and I overlook the ocean." Some, you know, people will be able to name that, or others will say, "Well, it's when I'm with my granddaughter and we're playing a simple game." So we all have these experiences, and it's to be able to identify what those are, and then how we can embellish and enrich those and make sure they happen for us.
And are those mystical experiences?
Yeah, that's a way of describing it. Well, in some ways, yeah.
I mean, we don't call those moments mysticism in the culture.
I sometimes say it's the place of the holy. It's a moment of the sacred. It's being in touch with the holy, and we need to do that. And I think there are times or stages in our lives when that's really important, to really explore that and push on it.
And how would we pay attention to that, Joan? It's that openness, that intentionality, that single-mindedness to this journey. How does one pay attention to that? I've got to get up in the morning, scrape the snow off my car.
Well, it calls for an intentionality and some remembering, some storytelling about how important it is. When I tell my story of the Himalayas, I think it intrigues people to think, what is their Himalayan adventure? What is their journey? You know, what touches them with the holy? Where do they get their connectedness? You know, what draws them to be more connected with their body, or with the body earth? You know, with others who are so different.
And what would happen to our lives as ourselves, as single persons, and in community? What would happen if we didn't take that responsibility to take that journey?
Yeah, well, I think we buzz around a lot and can get preoccupied and pretty frustrated, and I think lose a sense of who we are. I know that in my busy moments and times when I'm getting very efficient and organized, that I lose a sense of who I am in the self. And I believe in our Christian tradition that the self is the most powerful witness to our faith. I mean, at the center of Christian faith is a person. It's not an idea, it's not an activity, it's a person. And people were drawn to that person. And so I've coming around to this, and I think it's probably reflective of my stage in my journey as a Christian minister. I've been ordained 20 years now. You know, I've spent a lot of time sort of upgrading, doing, you know, further education, getting skills, and felt like I needed that in order to do the work I've done. And I think that now I'm coming to a sense that, well, yeah, all of those are important, but at the core of it is my person, and how can I keep looking after that?
But this is a very difficult thing to understand, you know, finding in our lives these moments and places of holiness. So, I mean, I can imagine that it's hard for anyone to understand why you did this. Back to the comment, the earlier comment, and what feedback were you getting from different people?
You know, I needed to negotiate the time off with the congregation. You know, I applied for some grants to help me out to do this, and I think for some, you know, this seemed like a holiday. Like, why would we?
Or a holy day.
Well, what is a holiday? A holy day. You know, why would we support this person in going off and having an adventure? Whereas I know, because I've got grants and bursaries, you know, to go and do another theological degree or to go and get a specific skill. I mean, there is no question about that. But to hike in the Himalayas, you know, even framing it around, you know, having done some reading on Buddhism and you know, having had a kind of a mentor to talk to about it.
Right.
So I think this is hard stuff.
This is
you
difficult.
know, it's very hard stuff.
So let's listen to the poem that was part of your preparation.
Yeah. Yes.
That'll tell us why the Himalayas and help us understand why the journey for all of us.
This is a poem written by Miriam Teresa Winter, who is actually a Roman Catholic laywoman from the United States, and it's called a psalm about mountains. And psalms are expressions from the soul, and so this is what she says about mountains. And I read this, found this before I went, and had it in my pocket during my journey, and then still find it meaningful. Mountains are there, simply there, strong, silent, enduring, keeping vigil without complaint from before I came into being, and they will be there when I am gone. Mothers are like mountains. I lift my eyes to the mountains where I feel your strength, O God. Mountains see what the eye cannot see, are above and beyond complexity, touched by the infinite toward which they reach. Mystics are like mountains. I lift my heart to the mountains where I feel your presence, O God. Mountains watch the world go by, keeping perspective, keeping faith, always affirming what happens to be, always welcoming every encounter in any season on any day. Friends are like a mountain. I lift my soul to the mountains where I encounter you, O God. Mountains are what we have to climb to get to the other side of things, to get to the other side of ourselves, to grow to know there is more to life than what happens here on the plains. We can be like a mountain. I lift myself to the mountains where I am one with you, O God. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Pressure Point.
The preceding program was produced through the facilities of Rogers Community 4, Vancouver. We want to hear from you and invite you to leave your comments and suggestions on our 24-hour response line message machine. Please call 731-5812.